All right, welcome to this week's Tech Insights series. We are talking about the best of Microsoft Inspire 2021. If for those that don't have good awareness of what Inspire is Microsoft's partner and sales kickoff for the year, and it really sets a tone for how Microsoft is helping businesses to adopt its technologies, and also in this case was a go live for a bunch of new technologies that it released to the market. So great conversation today for us to talk about what Microsoft brought to the table in the Inspire conference and how it can benefit your business. So what are we doing? We're talking about Microsoft Inspire. We'll be going through the top learnings. And I also, before we get started, I want you to have an awareness of our next webinar, which is on August 19th, which is Accelerating Industry 4.0. It's a vision of smart manufacturing with industry expert John Dyke. John Dyke is the president of CESME, which is the Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Institute, and he will be a fantastic guest for that conversation. Such a wealth of information. He had been a guest on the Change Agent podcast a while back, and just wonderful, wonderful wealth of information. So let's get started. So what the biggest splash that was made at Inspire this year was Windows 365. Windows 365 is about leveraging the investments that have been made in the entire Microsoft 365 stack to create access anywhere desktops that are available from any device at any place at any time, and allows your information to flow with you and complement your other devices that you're using that have that same data. So when you think about the demands of the modern workplace, there are demands pressed upon us by the change of the workplace, remote work, hybrid work. I've heard people refer to it as high flex work. The idea that we are doing our work from anywhere, and that work, when done from anywhere, should be as accessible as possible. Our goal is not to say that this is a first class and second class experience. The idea should be that regardless of where you're doing your work, the modern workplace should serve you well. It should fit an elastic workforce that fits in a variety of use cases, manufacturing use cases, healthcare use cases, working from your basement work use cases, working from overseas when you have people in a different time zone. All these scenarios where we have different types of devices and settings that we're accessing the workplace from should be first-class experiences. We also need to support that this represents organizational expansion, change, that we're serving these use cases that we haven't served before. In many cases, it's the idea of bring your own PC. Perhaps you're engaging workers that are part-time workers that you don't need to give, they already have devices. They already have devices they're comfortable with. You just need to give them access to your environment and your data. Perhaps we're not even having to ship them a device in order for this to facilitate a secure, modern working experience. Also, we're talking about high-scale specialized workloads, scenarios where one of those bring your own PC workers has to execute on a dev workload in your environment that requires high scale capabilities or requires access to your segregated data. And then also the fact that regardless of what we do, it needs to be secure. All these demands need to be considered. So we talk a lot with our customers about the ideas of zero trust, about what the modern desktop and modern secure modern workplace provides. Microsoft has now layered onto this idea the idea of Windows 365. So Windows 365 is the ability to provide a complete cloud PC, a versatile, familiar, and productive platform that is able to be deployed easily, self-service by the end users and customers, that's secured within a common set of Microsoft security tooling, and it's streamed from the cloud to the device that you're using. It leverages Azure Virtual Desktop under the hood, but it simplifies the model from a consumption standpoint and allows you to be able to easily roll this out across your organization for these diverse workloads. It doesn't mean that everybody's necessarily going to get rid of their PC, their physical PC. A lot of that people, that's the best use case for them. But for many, using a streamed PC is a better use case. It's one that allows them to use the device they already have, the one they're comfortable using, maybe to use cheaper devices that are very disposable, or for us to be in scenarios where we might stream a particular part of the experience or a scenario that we haven't armed them with. Maybe I've armed them with a moderate computing capability PC and they need their dev PC. So I'm streaming this capability from a cloud PC perspective. This announcement represents a rumor that's been going around for a long time that Microsoft was developing a complete cloud PC platform. And they did that with Azure Virtual Desktop in a sense, by allowing us to both stream applications and stream the entire desktop platform. What Windows 365 does is it packages it as one consumable capability that we can sell at one predictable monthly price and allows us to consume. And it goes live in like a couple weeks. So we're talking about something that's very, very attractive and very attainable and usable that Microsoft announced and made a big splash and Inspire around. This is an example of what an experience might be for a person accessing that cloud PC. They hit that experience. They may even have multiple PCs that they're taking advantage of various types, one for creative projects, maybe one that's for daily use, maybe one that's an archive of a previous state they had going on. Allows us to be able to think about this in a very accessible way from anywhere at any point. Another aspect of this is it pairs with the other things that we love about the modern experience. It's the idea that when you're using the Microsoft M365 platform, you're leveraging the idea that your apps, your content, your settings exist in the cloud. And I might be using my local PC at one point, I might be using my cloud PC at another point, I might be using my mobile device at another point, and I can trust that my data that I'm accessing is secure, it's governed based upon conditional access, and in the context of the cloud PC, that even if I'm accessing it from devices that I don't control, devices that are, bring your own devices scenarios or remote scenarios, that I can give access to the information that's important, but ensure that that information stays there and maintains a secure profile. So the cloud PC's idea is to isolate these different elements, allow them to be accessible from where they need to be accessible from, and then the cloud PC takes advantage of that and allows them to be used by a user who we need to stream the PC versus providing them an isolated aspect of the PC through an app or an entire PC experience. This partners into what I consider the zero trust stories line in the sand. So many of our customers, they're working on this transition right now. They're saying, I have been running my legacy Windows experience for some time. It is wrought with group policy and with apps that I don't need and imaging processes and rollout deployment approaches. And it takes me 3 weeks to get a person a new PC and even longer when they're not on site and all this stuff, right? And then it's exasperated by the relationship between the device and the on-premise environment and the extent to which that device can be used to compromise the environment because it's on the CorpNet. What Zero Trust's line in the sand is the idea that the devices are not on CorpNet. The devices are separate from CorpNet. They're Azure AD joined, they're managed via cloud management, they're deployable as commodities, they're replaceable because the content is only synchronized there. It's not there as its final resting place. And that same strategy relates directly into the ideas around Windows 365 and the capabilities that are provided by Azure Virtual Desktop. In some cases, that legacy access can be provided via that proxy, via Azure Virtual Desktop, via Windows 365 in ways that allows for my primary device to have a profile which is not on CorpNet, but then I get access to CorpNet via these other kinds of means. And it has provided for many of my accounts that are moving, many companies I've been working at that are moving from a legacy state to a modern state, the backup way to be able to access their legacy apps without having to compromise their security at the same time, and partners with conditional access as a part of the story. So just an awesome addition, and I'm just super pumped about what Microsoft is doing here. They've really put us in a position where any device at any time can be used to access your corporate information, and the device itself becomes a commodity versus something that's a special snowflake. So if we're not talking about this already, this is something we should be talking about. All right, the next big announcement at Inspire wasn't really a tech announcement, but it represents the position of the migration bell curve that we're seeing right now. So Microsoft has renamed and expanded their Azure Migration program to be called Azure Migration and Modernization. And the thing that's most important about this is we are nearing the part of the bell curve where most companies are positioning the cloud as a migration state for their legacy environment as well as the modern environment. So if you consider a common technology adoption process, right? There's this, really early, very little earlier, you get this, early adopters period right here. And then you get to this part of the bell curve where you have most companies that are migrating, to whatever that technology is. And then you have this sort of straggler zone over here where it's like, you still haven't moved off Lotus Notes? Like, are you sure that's really where you still want to be? We don't want to be in that last zone. A lot of companies get benefit from being in those early zones. This middle part is where companies are migrating en masse. And that is exactly where we have now landed with the migration to Azure. So what Microsoft has done with the Azure Migration and Modernization program is they've made this you've never been in a better time to migrate. And I know it's sort of wow, that's kind of a sales tool. Yeah, it is, because what that is essentially communicating is we're going to give you everything you could possibly need to make your migration successful. Training, funding, support, analysis, fast track, CSAs. They're just throwing stuff at people doing migrations. All these assets exist to execute these migrations and get moving, especially the legacy migrations. There is a reason to move your legacy workloads to the cloud, whether it's cost, whether it's security, especially security, whether it's adoption of infrastructure as code, whether it's operationalizing so you can do modern workloads. All of these things rationalize moving out of our data centers, modernizing our staff so they can be prepared for what's coming, stopping spending money on these legacy workloads in the on-premise environment that are like boat anchors for us, ransomware mitigation, just start going through the reasons. All the assets that now exist through the Azure Migration program, they will train your team. They will fund a big chunk of the migration. They will help support it. There's a fast track who will actually help with migrations themselves and be partner to that. They'll help with the assessment up front and work with the ROI. They actually pay us to do ROI analyses for them. So there's so much activity that's happening around the Azure Migration program. This is the time not to get left behind. We went through a huge move around Office 365 migrations, and during those Office 365 migrations, you had the exact same bell curve. You had the people who are like, yeah, you're not prying my Exchange server out of my cold, dead hands. And then you went through this process of, okay, cool, I'm realizing this could work. I'm really realizing this could work, to a point where it's like, yeah, if you're keeping your on-premise Exchange server and there isn't like an extreme good reason, like you're operating out of a submarine and you need to be offline for 3 weeks, you need to be able to have this sort of, it's obvious that you're moving to Office 365, right, as part of your migration. So they threw in the same kind of stuff. All this stuff was getting thrown at these migration programs. And then at the tail end, it was like, all right, we're not doing a whole lot for you. You kind of just should have moved already, and we're moving on because we're working on new modern things. That eventually will be what happens here, I think. Most people will be moved to the cloud, and they'll be focused on modernization. They'll be focused on new custom applications being built and on big data projects that are happening. Now's the time to take advantage of these benefits. So when you look at a common migration pattern, this is usually what that pattern looks like. It's deploying governance and landing zone, preparing yourself to intake the migrated or new workloads. In many cases, companies are just building new workloads in the cloud, and the IT department hasn't caught up to do cloud governance yet and build out a true landing zone. So deploying the landing zone, establishing a center of excellence, assessing the cloud estate for migration. This is a great step in the process, is understanding the cloud estate, understanding what you can migrate, building a migration plan and the ROI behind it, and then organizing a migration factory that moves those workloads in the cloud, that achieves gains. Like, I've moved this workload to the cloud. I now have it micro network segmented. I now have cost management around. I've adopted a new operational model and I've taken out a bunch of tools. I know it's backed up and I've tested a recovery. How many of those things can you say for your on-premise environment right now? Oftentimes very few, especially in micro network segmentation. Few companies have done that. And then we need to be prepared to operate new platforms in the operating model and intake applications that are built for the cloud. This cloud program order events happens, and it's happening from company to company to company, and Microsoft is throwing resources at it. So huge announcement just around all the things they're doing. These are the three, horizon states: where you are now, moving the legacy machines, and then everybody who's building native stuff in the cloud. Are you prepared for that? Are you supporting it? That's one of the use cases that's going to continue to grow from here. So the Azure Migration Program's goal is allowing you to meet the modernization where it's at, building Horizon 3 applications on top of the cloud, meeting your existing teams and operationalizing, and then it's ultimately advancing capabilities to drive differentiation. One of the reasons why we build out the operationalized cloud and we move things to it is because it sets the bar, and it relieves us of having to take care of the legacy data center. It commoditizes how we execute on the legacy data center, and it gets us focused on the modern cloud applications. So when we think about it just like this, that the below the line services are thinking about, how do I prepare my cloud transformation with efficiency, enablement, security, so the business can execute on apps and products and data and AI on top of that cloud? How can I be a partner to drive marketplace disruption through the cloud that allows me to be a differentiator as my business takes on technology as the very nature of what it does? So much that can happen here, and you can see why Microsoft is putting so much energy behind it, just beyond even just the fact that that's how they're measured by the stock market, right? It is where companies are now moving. Okay, another interesting thing they talked about is applied AI services. Total shift from what we were talking about before, right? This is a completely different topic. Applied AI services, and what applied AI services is about is it's taking capability and driving it into action faster. Now, it's interesting if you listen to things like Twimmel AI and so on, there's so much diversity of where people believe the AI market is at right now. And in that diversity, there's also a risk of moving too fast. There's a risk of moving too slow. There's things that are ready for action. There's things that people perceive are ready for action that they don't take. They're taking advantage of almost too fast. So there's a lot of diversity to this space. What I think they're doing with applied AI services is they're taking things that work and they're bringing them to the table in as early usable ways as possible that allows forward movement to be made in these businesses. So this is not applying some of these breaking technologies to a point where we're like, should we be using this yet? ? What this is talking about in many cases is, how do I start to take advantage of commodity AI to make my application better, to make my documents better, to make my search application better? So let's break down a couple examples of this. So we're talking about, say, Azure Cognitive Search. So let's say you're building a customer ordering experience, and you have this highly diverse set of products that you're selling from that ordering experience. Perhaps instead of building that whole search platform yourself and investing in all the gearing of how that's done and building your own AI models to be able to create the search experience on top of that product catalog, we can use Azure Cognitive Search as a vehicle to be able to do the search for us, to be able to expose content for us, for my consumers, and create a way for me to be able to leverage what's in my data catalog in a more accessible, faster way that doesn't require me to be a data scientist. It may require me to have understandability or an ability to recognize why I'm receiving results that I receive. Everyone who's using AI technology should have that understandability of their experience or explainability, but it doesn't mean I have to build it, right? So in this use case, Azure Cognitive Search can allow me to be able to position data that exists inside of my product catalog. Another example here is Azure Metrics Advisor. You know, our company is very active in the manufacturing space, specific to Industry 4.0 capabilities. So let's say you have a manufacturing environment that has all these lifts in it, and those lifts have a data that's coming off of them that we can understand and we can diagnose and we can look for failures, and potentially if it does fail, a person gets hurt and we want to mitigate that. Azure Metrics Advisor can allow us to accelerate interpreting existing data or data streams to be able to understand where challenges exist and predict where I might be having an issue so I can respond to it faster. So it's bringing, rather than having to say, okay, I got to hire a data scientist and a data scientist has to build this thing and then I have to respond to it. This allows us to get a little further down the road with what is sort of out of box, quote unquote, what that is being brought to the table as a package of capability before I have to do some of my own work. And you're seeing that expand with these applied AI services. So much interesting investment there. So an idea might be like, I'm interacting with my platform through a variety of means, vision, language, speech. And then as a component of that, I'm starting to understand data that might be in that image data, location data, phrase data, organizational data, people, the idea of whether I'm doing that for the purpose of recognizing the form or to interact with an experience or even to make an experience more accessible. One of the biggest challenges that we have with building custom platforms is just accessibility, like allowing people with other languages to interpret what's there or allowing me to interact with it with speech because maybe I have challenges with reading the text or there's an experience with speech that I need to interpret to a different language. There's different ways that I can expose it. Now, there's all sorts of challenges wrought with that, right? There's challenges that are in terms of, am I doing effective machine language translation? Is my language model created in a way that mitigates some of the ethical challenges? All those things come into play, but allows us to continue to move the ball forward and address some of those challenges as we go. So a lot that's happening in applied AI services, and really, I think it encourages us to build more AI into our applications in an understandable way that we can take advantage of. And then finally, I want to hit on the things that are happening with Viva. We talked about Viva in our Ignite conversation and our Build conversation. Viva is a tool that's oriented around hybrid, or what one person said when I was meeting with him, a high flex work environment. The language we're trying to mitigate here is this return to work, right? Like I wasn't working before, right? Like we suddenly went remote. We're now coming back to work like I wasn't working. Like, no, we're moving to a hybrid or a high flex environment where all workers have a certain degree of flexibility, and flexibility means working where it makes sense for the experience we're trying to achieve. And then also being inclusive to people that we may have or have hired or continue to hire that will never be physically in person with us. So creating an inclusive experience for all our workers. So that's leveraging what Viva is considering itself an employee experience platform. And a lot of content was released at Inspire surrounding Viva as an employee experience platform and pulling in content. That means relating a person to the purpose and goals of the business, the accentuation of culture and communications, just regardless of where a person is, understanding that only certain things can be experienced remote or in person, right? We get that, but maximizing the extent to which we can build human-to-human experiences, real personal empathy in our business as a part of building employee experience platforms. Knowledge and expertise, well-being, engagement, and growth and development tied to the ideas of learning plans and what's best for the person. well-being and engagement tied to how are my people doing? Are they happy? Are they doing well? Am I executing well as a manager? Am I thinking about what this person's life, what's going on in their life right now, and being a good manager to them? That's all part of an employee experience management platform. So that's where Viva comes to the table. So Viva has 4 components. It has Viva Connections, which is GAing. We have Insights, which had already GA'd and is continuing to expand, now integrating Glint. So if you ever heard about Glint, which is another employee experience management platform, just so much that's tied in with Insights and Glint together to create an ability for us to make this the best work environment possible, that we can make people the best versions of themselves at work, at home, and everywhere in between. The learning experience, Viva Learning is the learning experience for creating learning journeys for individuals, and Viva Topics, the idea around leveraging content in a smart way to make it accessible across the business through automated means. So let's leverage the content we've produced to aid discoverability of content versus what happens to a lot of content is just gets lost. Build something, it's out there, it's lost, I never get turned into knowledge. How can I reuse content and turn it into knowledge? So Viva is accentuating these ideas and driving us toward better ability to be able to create an employee culture. All right. Wow, that was a lot. I'm so thankful for taking the time. Those are some of the big announcements we've seen at Microsoft Inspire. I would love to have us meet virtually one-on-one with you to talk about these topics. So if you want to talk about Windows 365 or accelerating your Azure migration or AI or employee experience, let's do it. We will meet with you one-on-one. We'll do it for free. We'll have a great conversation. We'll talk about what's going on in your business and we'll help drive you forward. And also don't miss our upcoming webinar on Industry 4.0, a vision for smart manufacturing with John Dyke. That is going to be a great conversation. There's just so much opportunity to be able to accelerate our manufacturing environments, both in terms of how we operate the manufacturing space and how we drive our external products that we build for our customers. When you leave this webinar, you're going to get a pop-up asking us to talk one-on-one. Respond to the pop-up. Let's do something. I'd love to have that conversation with you. Have a great rest of your Thursday and have a wonderful week.